BIP of Bizarre Interest Productions, and the final episodes of Kamen Rider Girls Remix, Kamen Rider Eins Girls Remix is out, subbed, and available. So it's finally time to decide whether or not this was the proper finale, conclusion, and send-off to Girls Remix. So, type Girls Remix Forever, or Fatale Finale, or Eins Supremacy, or heck, tell me who your favorite heroines are in the comments below, suited and non-suited women, and let's get started. At Bluebird headquarters, Sumire Kurono, leader of Cloud, has escaped, and a shot later, the Cloud leader takes on almost all the personnel on her own, retrieving the super energy converter while on the outside, a mysterious goo alters Renge from Godchard's attention as it starts to gain mass. After the intro shot showing all the members of Girls Remix, Rene, Akiko, Hana, Reika, Sara, Nozomi, Sawa, Renge, more on her later, Nayuta, and Reina, which is a nod since they include the villains in the tagline, she may be a villain, with 10 members so far. Hana gets confirmation from George that Sumire broke out with Bluebird, with the belt, and after lamenting about how and why they've been able to use tech to revive both users and their drivers, as well as the attempts on making the converter belt, Rene starts getting 100 vibes, giving the similarities, and with Sumire believing that Nayuta would be targeted next, Rene's on Nayuta guard duty to get her while she's getting groceries, Hana's hunting Sumire, and Akiko's going to meet Renge to deal gloomy slime alien case. Foreshadowing. Nayuta ends up overusing her strength, and after getting flashbacks to her situation and even pushing Rene away, she starts to remember her memories when Cloud's new members, Reina Karumi, arrive to retrieve her, alongside and sending her generals and fellow cyborgs, the rude Carla Shinomoe and the more stoic Anga Kirana. Note this off, talk about their dates on their dog tags later. Reina, flustered, activates her AI to predict Majade's actions, then finishes Majade off with Mue's Tavida, creating an energy drill chain with energy to pull her in and slash them with a dagger. If you saw my reaction video, I said it was a Rider Punch, but no, it was a Rider Slash. I was wrong, my mistake. Reina takes Nayuta, and Nayuta learns from Sumire that she was a cyborg the whole time, but she had escaped before she could be properly reconditioned. And Sumire organized the death of her parents, with Sumire originally being meant to have her as the first cyborg, ready to move on to the final phase of their plan. Rene wakes up, found by Nozomi, who advises her to rest, but Rene refuses and vows to go after Nayuta, so Nozomi relents and contacts Sawa to meet up with them and go after Sumire. Sawa leads the two to a cloud lab thanks to asking Izu off screen, and Nozomi and Rene proceed to rush in despite her protests, fighting Nayuta in the middle of surgery. Rene refuses to lose to Rena again and brings out a Thropos' ring to fight, and Carla and Egna decide to fight the sidekicks, with Nozomi going to fight Carla after insulting her, while Sawa proves to Anga that her stamina is why Gotentoku is attracted to her. Meanwhile, Akiko and Renge find a location where the goopy slime alien was, and a familiar voice calls out to them for the name calling, with Renge fainting, and Akiko recognizes who that is. Meanwhile, Twilight Majade fights Mues, and to try to stop the projective AI from causing the same result, Rene busts out Warp Terra and Monteseris to use Twilight Luminous, combining the former's warping portals with the latter Sagittarius vibes to shoot arrows from behind and outzone the mid-range fighter's predictions. When Majade questions why someone already dead would work for someone who brought them back to life only to try and use them as a tool, Mues actually understands but plans to earn her freedom, aka buying it by defeating her. A clash of Mues Tavida and Twilight Nova later, Majade is able to beat Mues and get her back to normal. While Nozomi and Carla and Sawa and Anga duke it out, the two cyborgs regroup with their leader dead and bust out the Kamen Rider Chronicle Gasha and a wizard driver, taking on familiar poses to transform, much to Sawa's dismay. When Sumire comes out, Rene's suspicions seem confirmed. It is 100 given the face tattoos, right? But Akiko shows up with Reika, Hana, and Sara as backup, all of whom support in their own semi-cute ways, and Narumi Detective Agency face Akiko herself has figured out Sumire Kurono's true identity. A go-buster gone rogue! Just kidding. Akiko notes her syndicate invades parallel worlds and copy Kamen Rider powers, making her the 100-member Kronos, an anagram if you take the Su of her first name and mix it with Kurono. And Akiko confirms that information came from a certain space alien friend with a certain familiar pose. But we have another plot twist because that intel is apparently outdated. Sumire monologues 100 just made copies and nothing beats the original, so she kissed that group goodbye and started her own faction cell to create her own original organization. Cloud, or Crowd, depending on the Romanji. Grateful for the ladies for all the combat data, and all but confirming she revived Koyomi and the others for that purpose. Claiming she's ready to meet and make her own full original Kamen Rider very soon, after Nayuta is ready to transform. But she's got her own surprise in the meantime, the Femme card deck. Though it is a pale imitation, Bluebird had a file of Ryuga's combat data ripe for the taking from the revised vs. Geats movie, which he uses to turn the deck of the Majestic Siren into an obsidian onyx, completing her henshin into Kamen Rider Fatale. However, Reika, Rene, Hana, and Sara transform into Sebala, Twilight Majade, Algereda, and Hakubi with the ninja accessory, and charge against their forces, with Nozomi and Sawa also joining in for the fun against the grunts. Algereda takes on Anger Mage and is able to defeat her, Sebala is able to defeat Carla's ride player form, and Sara uses the Ninja Buckle Fever's attack to use a tactical slash of all 4 elements to destroy the grunts. Twilight and Majade and Fatale duke it out, but Fatale uses Guard Vent to block all of her attacks, Sword Vent to summon the Dark Wing Slasher via the Beast, and in the final vent, summoning a Dark Blank Wing to perform Misty Slash, blasting the heroines in the air to strike down the heroine quartet. Nayuta is finally brought out, though clearly torn of her purpose and suffering with Fatale egging her on to become the destructive Kamen Rider. However, Rene fights her and despite losing, calls out Nayuta for supposedly admiring her, pointing out riders don't just resign and let fate happen to them, because the journey will be hard, but she can fight on her own terms if she takes the next step. Don't lay down, decide who you are, because that's what it means to be a Kamen Rider. Femme argues that that's quite enough from her when Nayuta pushes her aside, accepting her growth and her decision to sway fate into her own hands, throwing her dog tag to the side and promising to fight those causing more sadness in the world, declaring her identity and her new Kamen Rider name, the cyborg, Kamen Rider Eins. Alright, with the transformation, Eins garners a suit and Fatale is admonished to give her original creation a performance test, claiming her test subject's inhumane status would mean she couldn't get a happy life. And though Nayuta questions if being a cyborg means she won't be happy, a rocket punch of optimism flies in, declaring it's space time, or Nadeshiko time. Akiko declares, with Nadeshiko admitting she went to visit Gentaro and the Rider Club, and she acts XVII as an express ride to Earth. Nadeshiko points out that yeah, they are 2 inhuman misfits then, birds of a feather, pointing out regardless of what type of girl you are, human or not, who gives a damn, and offers her to be friends, resulting in the Kamen Rider Club handshake. Nadeshiko helping Nayuta fight Fatale, and Eins promising to move forward by defeating Fatale, finishing her deceptive creator off with her own rider kick. Sumire dies, grateful her original Kamen Rider turned out to be better than imagined, and a beautiful helmet shot later, Nayuta unmasks. Uncommons? Unmask herself, hugging the person and role model who helped her find her path, and we get smiles from all around, from our more reserved members to even our more outgoing members, but not before our dual leads can grin together after the job is done. In the wrap-up, Nayuta decides to leave Girls Remix and potentially college, standing on her own as a proper Kamen Rider, but Rene found her old dog tag and used her alchemy to reforge it into a ring to commemorate her fresh start. And as Akiko, Shotaro, and Eiji would say, Kamen Riders support each other, and they'll be there because Girls Remix is forever, right? As Nayuta heads off. Back at West London, Rene gets confronted by her teacher Sumiko Ozawa, who calls her out for skipping her classes in a half-respect, mocking nod of bravery. Naturally, Rene doesn't know her teacher's history with past riders, passing it off as a personal matter, but Ozawa notes her experience has helped her mature a bit, and encourages her to keep growing until she's able to stand on her own, with Rene getting acknowledgement from her sensei and senpai to continue. At the end, we get Nayuta's new theme song, the lyrics pointing out you can't just imitate others to get where you need to be, and the desire to live life on your own time. It's your choice to stand and fight, so make some goddamn history. And that's how Girls Remix ends, and Kamen Rider Eins begins. Before we talk about my thoughts, I got some major issues with the story. First off, I know it's because they're original characters, but it feels like Carla and Anga could have had a bit more emphasis on them either being willing accomplices as cyborgs or similar to the German 66, too brainwashed to realize they've been used, or at least Sumire being the cause of that. The cloud agents I can buy being robotic androids or soulless cyborgs, but it feels like Anga and Carla could have had a bit more lament or traces of the fact that they're all victims in all of this, a la Surgeon Kit from Sonic IDW. Second, Renge being used as a client was creative, but after she passes out, it's like the episode forgot they even had her. It was probably a last-minute inclusion since we saw an Instagram post with her and Rene's actress Reo, but at the same time, we really could have had her at least see or interact with the rest of the girls, even if she and Rene didn't speak to each other. Like the advertisement played at Renge and Akiko were Osaka girls. And speaking of which, no one wanted to see the Osaka girls grab some slippers and start kicking butt together, with Renge even busting out an old Kemi. Then again, Akiko's actress was confirmed pregnant, and Akiko's actress didn't necessarily get into any fights at the Halloween party either. Third, also, why the heck was Akiko and Nadeshiko's hug in the background? Put that on screen! Fourth, as cool as it was for Ozawa to have shown up since they did mention her since the second Girls Remix, it depends on if her availability was manageable, but I think the second film should have at least said Rene was told by her professor she still had room to grow. That would pay off now, but the past 3 films have all been about her growth, but it still could have added a bit more to Rene's developments. Alright, let's get to the positives. Alright, time for some praises. First, let's talk about some of the nods and respects that I'm not as familiar with compared to everyone else. I'd mentioned I have to talk about Carla and Onga's dog tags eventually, so I did some digging, and Carla Shinamoi's serial number 623-2013 was the air date of Mayu Inamori as Kamen Rider Mage, which fits Carla transforming into, well, Kamen Rider Mage. Meanwhile, Onga Kirana's dog tag reveals her birthday is April 2nd, 2017, which was the air date of episode 25 of Kamen Rider Ex-Aid, which featured the debut of the Ride players, aka who she was also transforming into. Meanwhile, Onga's pose references Gento Himura, the protagonist and human host of Ultraman Blazar, which is a nod to her playing Henri Minami in that series. Also, we have representation from Agito, Double, Amazon's Build, Saber, Revice, Geets, Gotchard, Fies, and Forze. And when you take into account that Fatale was made from Yuki's magic system, alongside hundreds use of Wizard and X8 forms, that's 13 different Kamen Rider seasons given time and focus in less than 35 minutes, which is genuinely impressive. And while there's a clear focus on Nayuta and Rene, no one outside of Renge really feels left out. Akiko gets to uncover some of the mystery and joins in with the emotional send-offs as the leader. There's always concern for her allies and resolve to crush pests no matter what size they are still intact. Sawa still has that infamous line and a balance of her playful and dangerous demeanor. Reika's brief but has enough lines about her supporting her sisters in arms. Hana gets to be the only sane one as well. Sarah shows that even though she was kind of new to this, Rene and Nayuta are her friends and she wants to help them out. Rena spends the story with her personality intact and going out with her humanity, and despite my issues with it, Ozawa does cap off Rene's growth since as her teacher, she could tell how her student has grown thanks to her experience and mentorship. Also, before the girls' remix riders transform, they use catchphrases of past riders, slightly altered. Aguilera says, "I'll defeat you quickly," like John does. Sabala says, "We'll protect the balance of the world," which went out of Kamen Rider Blaze from her show says. Hakubi says, "If it means saving sweet Nayuta, I'll put my life on the line," which is a nod to Hiromi Kadoka and Kamen Rider Demon's phrase. And some arguments about Hajime's with Rene's line, though that's more debatable. So, let's talk about Akiko, Nadeshiko, Fatale, Rene, and Nayuta. First off, no one probably noticed this, but Akiko dropping Renge to the floor, cruel as it was definitely a nod to how she almost was never able to catch Philip or Shotaro whenever the other had to transfer the consciousness to the other, and no one except the diehards are going to realize that. Second, Nadeshiko's actress was only able to do voice work, but it was still cool that they used her to explain how Akiko was able to connect Sumire's ties to 100, given her space travels would allow her to keep up with what's been going on Earth. And they tie her origins to something she's proud of, since regardless of if you watch Forza's movies, you can tell her friends she made was able to help her make her feel comfortable and act, feel, and be more human in spite of her origins. And it's a good message she teaches Nayuta, because in spite of your origins, you are human and a girl. And other girls will accept you either for having similar backgrounds, or they won't judge you because of your differences, which given the climate in both Japan and America, feels very appropriate. But let's talk about Fatale, Rene, and Nayuta, because I want to talk about whether or not this served as the proper finale to Girls Remix. And that starts with Sumire Kurono, aka Kronos. Personally, I think it's great they reused 100, but built it based on similar to Foundation X, in it having the main antagonist after the first be a Splinter Cell, taking the legacy of villainesses and anti-villains across the franchise and forcing the heroines to overcome them. And while it's actually kind of hilarious she has to use Fatale as a copy of Femme, it's kind of fitting that she branched out on her own and still organized this all to the point where she was able to merge the concept of the first Dark Rider and the first female rider to create her own Femme Fatale Kamen Rider. And speaking of Fatale, Femme has never really gotten a chance to face off against the Rider 1v1 and hold her own without a caveat in Ryuga helping her out against Oja. And while Siren as Dragon Knight definitely performed better with battles against Dragon Knight, Axe, Strike, and Raph, as well as actually being able to participate in the final battle with everyone, this is the first time that the Femme-related suit has actually defeated actual riders and knocked them out of their transformation in base form. And the first time Femme's final event actually worked on someone. Considering Femme's original user Miho had barely a chance to fight on her own without getting dog-walked or hindered by certain characters needing to live, it's definitely a great spectacle for Femme's suit and the legacy that she had as the first official female Kamen Rider. And with Sumire, it's fitting that despite her methods going far beyond what Miho wanted in resurrecting her sister, Sumire spent all this time causing the death of Nayuta's parents, kidnapped her, and turned her into a cyborg while using the data of other female riders and villains to use them, including ordering Even's survival Grand Prix akin to a team version of the rider fight from Ryuki. Sumire dies thanks to her ideal original rider and dies happy at her own creation, and if you remember, everyone in Ryuki has an ironic death. It fits so well. And let's talk about Rene and Nayuta together. It's kind of funny how, despite neither one being involved in the first Girls remix, they followed John and Aguilera's stories, and that one had more experience as a heroine but still had room to grow, in Rene working with her senpais in order to save Nayuta, and after Nayuta had to learn from Rene and the other heroines about what makes a Kamen Rider. It really shows how that paid off with this movie. Rene gets beaten and knocked down, and yet she refuses to let the person who joined her in Girls Remix die or be used as a pawn, especially after she spent her show pushing herself away from an organization who cared less for the people that they were under. Using Twilight to further the themes that your origins as a writer means Nayuta doesn't have to do this alone furthers the fact that Rene, who some argued felt artificial as a character, is someone who continues to grow, especially when you remember the cards that she used. Macetosaurus was used in the Fantastic Amalgam's mixes Gigas created to try and break Hotaro out of the Nijigon egg, and Rene fought to hold it off until Hotaro was ready. Meanwhile, Warptera was the Kemi who she, Spanner, and Hotaro had to fight while dealing with Minato finally facing off against them all as Dread Type 2. And this time she's able to take those Kemis as her own in tandem to take on an opponent with a technological advantage and defeat Mues, in essence saving the souls of artificial life Enchained. Heck, her ability to use two Kemis at once, Twilight Luminous, was something the show didn't even let her use yet until the special. And yet, even as she loses against Nayuta physically, she refuses to let her friend fall into despair, which is someone who has struggled with fighting her depression beyond battling her emotions in the past. Guiding Nayuta to embracing the person she wants to be shows off how far Rene has become as a character. And as for Nayuta, her growth for what we got is pretty good. All her doubts in her origins, especially learning about her parents' death wasn't an accident and just wanting the suffering and violence to end, is reasonable. And after all she's been through seeing their veteran heroines and Rider Girls go through, how can she call herself a fan if she's not willing to fight and overcome her issues? But at the end of the day, it's her fate to decide. And even when Nayuta decides to do so, it's not easy. The person responsible for her suffering is still guilt-tripping her into being unable to find happiness. But similar to how Rene found her own support group in Hotaro and her friends, Nadeshiko is able to show Nayuta value her own origins and move forward by beating her abuser. And it shows at their conclusions. Rene was able to motivate someone else after only managing to redeem Athropos in her death, but through giving them the drive to their life by refusing to give on her, Nayuta also wants to prove that she can stand on her own, but she can go knowing that she has a place with Rene, with Akiko, with the rest of Girls Remix, and she can fight the remnants of Cloud to use her pain and stop others from going through a similar tragedy. In the first Girls Remix, John and Aguilera, Yuriko transformed into Black Tackle, an evil black version of Kamen Rider's very first heroine, and the heroines had to work together to stop them from being taken advantage of alongside the young and isolated women that they were forced to indoctrinate and kidnap. Now in the final Girls Remix, the ladies team up to stop Sumire and Cloud from being used as their first official rider. Sumire transforms into Kamen Rider Fatale, which is a mirrored color of Kamen Rider Femme, the first official female Kamen Rider. Only this time, the woman who is being taken advantage of overcomes her personal brainwashing to become an official Kamen Rider herself. I asked the question, was Eins a proper send-off finale and conclusion to Girls Remix? Don't get me wrong, if it were up to me, I would have gone through hell to get Yua and John's actresses back for this. Not to mention Neon getting involved as well, since she never got to be a part of any of these as the only heroine missing out so far. But at the same time, I think about the message of the first installment. A group of heroines helping another revalue their love, and also help out fellow victims also searching for a home. And how from Akiko to Reika and Hana, they continued to guide Rene and Nayuta through what it means to be a writer. And it was ultimately a story about people who were lost at one point in their lives. Through the compassion and support of others, were they not only able to grow, but also be able to be the hand that reaches out to someone else in need. In an age where young women and men and people in between seem lost, sociopaths with power seek to use and exploit the youth with no regard for their well-being, especially women, and the worst people in the world actively seek to undermine, dehumanize, and strip women and innocent people of their agency and existence. Especially in a franchise that was kind of guilty of having this treated towards their female characters for some time. Isn't it poetic to have a story where different women from different backgrounds, different hardships, different powers, all aligned and work together to stop the worst possible people from exploiting others like them and having each other's backs along the way? And that's kind of the beautiful aspect of these specials. On the surface, it's giving heroines the focus and fight scene they deserve, but it's also reminding us, regardless of our status in life, we have the power to fight the evils in the world, and if we feel alone, there will always be a hand to reach out. And if one girl can inspire another to do so, who's to say we can't do the same in our own lives? Talking about Kamen Rider Girls Remix, all 4 installments was not something I expected to do when I started this channel, but since no one else on YouTube until recently even bothered to touch it, I'm glad I got to be the one who covered all 4. Kamen Rider's treatments of his suited and supportive women has always been a mixed bag of increasing quality over the years, and even though some of this treatment still persists in the modern day, the fact that Kamen Rider can value its actresses, heroines, villainous, and fans regardless of gender and open them back is still a sight to behold. And regardless of some bad takes of the most unserious side of Kamen Rider's community, I'm glad Girls Remix exists. Koichi Sakamoto, thank you for the amazing action and stunt work. Hiroki Uchida, I give you flack every now and then, but thank you for giving the heroines their time to shine. And to all of you, thank you all for watching. Thanks for supporting Kamen Rider's heroines. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share this video around. This took a lot of energy and time to make. And BIP of Bizarre Interest Productions, signing off.